Today's video is sponsored by Squarespace. So we're starting off with quite a big question, maybe too big. We'll see in the future. I might niche it down in the future. But the question today is, who has had the best prime in Formula One history? Which driver has had the best prime? Of best possible quality, excellent, the state or time of greatest vigour or success in a person's life. I've never used the word vigour in my entire life until today. Maybe you can suggest a good name down in the comments below for this series. Basically, I ask you lot a question, you give me your answers, and then I react to your answers. Simple, it's not rocket science. Make sure you follow me at @TomMcCluskey_ on Twitter if you want to get involved in these in the future, because I will always post my questions on there, as well as my YouTube community. So make sure you like the video. I know the dislike ratio thing is gone, but still like it and subscribe so that you get my community posts as well. Happy days. So yeah, I'm not looking for greatest of all time over the course of their career. I'm looking for the best prime period, even if they fell off afterwards or weren't anything to shout about beforehand. One season isn't enough. I think for me, it's like 2 minimum. To have one really good dominant season, I don't think that's enough time to be considered a prime in my personal opinion, but I didn't put that nuance. I just asked the question online, and now we're gonna look at your responses. But before that, I want to tell you about something that I truly love. Websites. You're on a website right now, watching me, or an app, I guess. On websites, you can buy stuff, you can read things, you can look at things. And it's 2021. In this day and age, it's not difficult to have your own website. I've got my own, and I use Squarespace to host my website because, in my opinion, they are the best website hosting platform out there. Whether you're running a higher value e-com business or just want to blog for pictures of your dog, Squarespace has price points for everyone if you want to design, build, and host your very own website. Just head to squarespace.com and give it a look. You haven't got to pay a penny to set up an offline site, play around with the functionality, get used to it, take your time, make yourself at home. And then when you are ready and happy to go live, use the discount code TOMMOF1 at checkout, or give the link in the top line of the description a tap, and you'll get 10% off your very first website or domain. In no particular order, let's start with the man of the moment, Fernando Alonso Diaz. Just come off the back of a very, very well-deserved P3 at the Qatar Grand Prix, and was suggested quite a lot in responses to this question. At BrettRuss2 on Twitter, unpopular opinion here, but would say Fernando Alonso. He only had the best car for 2 years and he won both of those titles. Then he continued to bring cars that shouldn't be near the front right down to the wire in contention for a championship. At Cole Vias, Alonso in his prime was godly. To beat the so-called best Schumacher back in 05 and 06 has to be recognised. He was also godly in that 2012 season in a car which wasn't worthy of the position he finished in. Comet Motorsports on YouTube community. Alonso, I think the stats don't really tell the full story. To do what he did, such as almost winning the championship in 2012 in the cars that he had, is incredible. At Madridita, Alonso, the man could have been able to fight for championships even with a Citroen C15. He didn't win as much as Vettel, Schumi or Lewis, amongst others, but I think there are a lot of factors that affect winning a title apart from good hands. His best season, IMO 2012. And finally, Stefan Vladica. Alonso's prime is very underrated. He was the driver to end the Schumacher domination, which seemed impossible at the time. Well, his 2 titles in 2005 and 6 were obviously very impressive in a field with like prime Schumacher, Kimi, Juan Pablo Montoya, comfortably ahead of teammate Giancarlo Fisichella. Both seasons pushed close in 2005 by Kimi and then Schumacher in 2006. Look, you've already said it. To come in and dislodge 5 times world title winner Michael Schumacher, like, I know all good things have to come to an end, but it takes a driver and a team to come through and do that. To do that 2 years on the trot as well, because Schumacher picked it back up again in 2006, is bloody impressive. And the field was like super competitive. You had the Renault, the Ferrari, the McLaren, even the Honda, the Toyota and the Williams could all get podiums on merit. And then 2012, he lost the title to Vettel by just 3 points in the end. And I think that 2012 fight was the closest we've had to this one. It's the most recent title fight beyond this year, where you've got 2 main protagonists from different teams fighting up to the last race of the season. Did Fernando have a worse car than Seb in 2012? Look, I know you lot will argue until you're blue in the face in the comments. Keep it nice, all right? Seb was in the best car in my opinion, but also he got the most out of the best car, which not everyone can do. And Fernando's prime was unquestionably one of the best. Next, we have another driver who took 2 titles in a row in the Schumacher era. I'm of course talking about my childhood hero, the driver I loved most growing up, Mika Hakkinen. At Donardi F1 on Twitter, Hakkinen in 98, 99 and 2000, his peak was god tier, but prior to that, everyone could see that he was fast, but he also seemed inconsistent. Coulthard was arguably the more complete driver of the two McLaren drivers at the end of 97, but Mika was ready to step it up to Schumi level. At JNair11, in his prime, Hakkinen was probably the quickest driver ever in terms of raw pace, barring possible 05 Raikkonen. Going into 98, he had only won one race, 97 Jerez, thanks to the agreement with Williams and some crashing out. 2 years later, he was a double world champion. At Jar Sui, Mika in 98 and 99 really tussled with some of the greats, not to mention his building form in the run-up certainly deserves a mention. You could argue that with the same number one priority Michael Schumacher enjoyed, he would have been mighty. Look, 98, 99, Mika Hakkinen was pretty special to me. I would have been like 6, 7 at the time. That West McLaren with a Hakkinen helmet in it is my first memory of Formula 1. And especially in 98, Mika got 8 wins, Schumacher just 6. And with 3 retirements all season, he finished every race bar 2 on the podium that year. Although Schumacher did the same, which just goes to show that them two were miles clear of everyone else, which is exactly what's happening this year, to be fair. Of course, there will always be a caveat for me around that 99 season. Yes, Mika won the title. Michael Schumacher broke his leg after a big shunt at Stowe. Had to miss 7 races, and the final 2 where he came back, he got 2 P2s. Mika only won that title by 2 points ahead of Eddie Irvine. And would Michael Schumacher, if he'd done the full season, finish behind Eddie Irvine? I don't need to answer that question. Mika is one of my favourite drivers of all time in Formula 1. But for me, knowing what I know about his career, was his prime a top tier prime? Probably not. But of course, we can't keep mentioning Schumi without talking about Michael Schumacher himself, can we? At Brazil McLaren, 11 wins in a 17 race calendar, finished on the podium at every race. Ridiculous consistency, 97 to 2006. Malaysia, after coming back from a broken leg, got pole by almost a second. At Daniel Root, Schumacher at Ferrari absolutely dominated, especially in 2002, where he never finished off the podium. He also broke the record for the most race wins that year and the shortest time to clinch the World Championship. Can't get much more dominant than that. Dhruv Jain on YouTube Community, Schumacher was a phenomenon. Even my mum, who wasn't an F1 fan, loved him, and he had charisma, appeal, and best of all, speed. Clearly, Mama Dhruv has exceptional wheel knowledge. At F1 Bucko, I'd argue very strongly for Michael, practically 10 years in prime 94 to 04, come off back-to-back championships at Benetton to a completely uncompetitive Ferrari, and then went on to dominate with Ferrari. At Still Jim Gaming, Michael Schumacher for me, even putting his dominance in the Ferrari to one side, his ability to push the greats in the 90s while in a worse car was amazing. Probably one of the most consistent drivers in the sport, and that pole after returning from injury, man was a machine. 5 world titles on the bounce, something Lewis may match this year if he wins it, but if he doesn't, then no one's done 5 in a row. Only 4 for Fangio, Hamilton and Vettel, which is quite frankly pathetic. Look, it's easy to say those titles come easy. Yes, 2001, 2002, very dominant. Even 2004, Barrichello, his teammate, finished second and was away down in points. But he did have a couple of Finnish thorns in his side in 2000 and 2003 with Mika Hakkinen and Kimi Raikkonen. They didn't make it easy for him, but he always found a way to win. Look, when Schumacher jumped into that Jordan 191 at the 1991 Belgian Grand Prix, I think everyone knew straight away that he was going to be something special. He made a seismic impact to Formula 1, hence why Benetton snapped him up so quickly. Don't forget about them 2 world titles he won at Benetton. By the way, the same team that Fernando would go on to win 2 world titles, dethroning Schumacher. There's some kind of irony in that, I feel. And also the way he took that Ferrari team that hadn't won a driver's title since Jody Scheckter in 1979, so it's like 21 years, he took them from nothing to 5 in a row. That is impressive. Yes, he had some questionable conduct with like Hill Villeneuve, which I didn't like. When I consider Michael's career, that's always a bit of a sour point for me, a bit of a caveat there. But in terms of prime periods on track, Michael Schumacher, even if you didn't give him a great car, he'd still put out a worldy performance. If you gave him a great car, he was unbeatable. And then, of course, there was Kimi, still racing today in F1 at 42 years of age. His final season in F1, and it has been quite the ride for the Iceman. At Ali LCFC 2005, Raikkonen in 2005 is such an underrated season, was such a dominant season with some incredible moments, his pole at Monaco and his win at Suzuka to name a few, and when he wasn't being played by reliability issues, he was almost untouchable. At Jordan Pinnock, feel like it has to be Kimi's mid-2000s run, one of the only drivers to take it directly to the Michael, and if it wasn't for the McLaren being about as reliable as Hermes, great joke, Hermes are a joke, he'd have 2 or 3 titles easily. That Suzuka drive was legendary. That move on Fisichella. At Subia 1998, Kimi in his prime was an absolute beast. He has worked miracles in that Adrian Newey McLaren. If not for mechanical failures, he'll be multiple world champion on his prime. He beat the best without resorting to any gamesmanship. Pure racer, leaves the space all the time. And finally from Ritvik, 0307, Kimi, quoting Kieran Smith's explanation below. This is a long one. Someone who innately, whether through genetics or upbringing, has a natural feel for the car in a way I've never seen before, but only read about with Tazio Nivellari. I don't know. Kimi has such a sensitivity to the car, he can literally detect software malfunctions in the traction control of his McLaren. This can be a blessing and a curse. His ability to adjust around the limit of the front axle to tolerate rear locking is unprecedented in F1 history from 2003 to 2006. In the title, he adapted to the Michelin size better than any other driver, and as Michelin said, he was the best driver they ever worked with. The results were incredible. He nearly won the 2003 title in an underpowered one-year-old McLaren compared with Williams and Ferrari, and would have won the title in 2005 if not for 3 retirements from the lead and 3 10-place grid penalties at races. He was set to dominate. Like any fine-tuned weapon, Kimi takes a lot of set work to get going, but when it's there, the results are horrifyingly impressive. Truly the fastest driver I have seen since Ayrton Senna at his tyre war peak. His McLaren onboards from that period are like an instruction manual all young challenge should be watching. As David Coulthard said after Kimi announced his retirement in 2021, he was at the peak of his game an exceptional driver, one of the true greats in terms of outright speed. Kimi is also the only driver to win in the V10, V8 and V6 era, a testament to his consistency and speed, while ranking 3rd all time in fastest laps, despite not often having the fastest car, speaks volumes. I think you lot have covered it pretty well there with Kimi Raikkonen. Phenomenal. McLaren Kimi for me, top tier Kimi Raikkonen. Lotus Kimi in 2012 as well. Top billing. The man was so good in his prime. I do think we have seen a drop off, but he's 42 now. So I think that's quite to be expected. That McLaren Kimi, like 2003 Kimi, one of my favourite F1 drivers of all time, like in a time period, you know what I mean? Brilliant. Now let's wind back to a driver I don't think gets as much respect as they deserve. 4-time World Championship winner, Alain Prost. Starting off with my second favourite son, Aldas. Hello, Aldas. Not the greatest, but Prost's 8 seasons from 1983 to 1990. In that time, he raced for 3 different teams, and apart from one season, 87, he finished either 1st or 2nd in the championship in every single one of them. Insane prime. Also, this was in an era of Senna, Mansell, and Piquet. Piquet didn't get a single mention that I saw on this, by the way. 3-time world title winner, Nelson Piquet. At Horrible Grandma, Prost 85 to 87, 2 titles and 12 wins in what was the second best car in 86 and third best in 87. He scored 196 points in that time. His teammates scored a combined 66, outscored Senna in both 88 and 89 as well. Prost for me is top 3 best of all time, to be honest. I think like 88, he scored more points than Senna. Yes, Senna won the title because they only took your top performances, but he did outscore Senna. Prost won his titles over the course of 9 seasons between 85 and 93. So defining like a prime is difficult in that. But for me, it's probably 88 and 89. That's when Senna was at his prime. They were both in the same team, head to head. And for me, Prost outperformed Senna. The way he was able to deliver with such consistency and poise puts Alain Prost right at the sharp end for me. But of course, we can't talk about Prost without talking about his greatest foe, Ayrton Senna. At Adam Ski 52, Senna 88 to 94 was absolutely outstanding, from dominating in a superior car and beating a 4-time world champ, constantly getting pole positions by ridiculous margins. Then in the later year, when he had an inferior car, that's when he showed how good he really was. At Harandine Nathan, it has to be Senna for me. The qualified master got every bit of speed out of every car he drove. One of the most dominant drivers on track who would never back down from a pass or give an inch to an opponent. His prime of 88 to 91 was immense, a true driver's driver. And Vincenzo Landino, I'm going to go with Senna 88 to 91. 44 poles and 27 wins out of 64 Grand Prix. Especially in terms of qualifying, Senna was on another planet. 88 Monaco Grand Prix, dry conditions, Ayrton in a McLaren, Alain in a McLaren. Ayrton goes 1.5 seconds, almost 1.5 seconds quicker than Alain Prost around Monaco. That's insane. His career was of course tragically cut short in 1994, which always lends the question kind of what could have been with Senna, because he did so much during his career, but he still had a lot of years ahead of him. He died when he was 34, which is 2 years younger than Lewis Hamilton is at the moment. Ever adored, the late 80s, early 90s Senna was a problem for a lot of people. Over a lap, probably the best to ever do it. Though 92, things didn't quite go Ayrton's way. That humble, moustached man from Worcestershire came along and cleaned up in 1992. I'm of course talking about Nigel Mansell. At JW2187, as a full season, I'd say Mansell in 92, 9 wins, which could have been 10 if it wasn't for tyre issues in Monaco, and 3 second place finishes, never finished outside the top 2, 14 poles in 16 with a second and a third place to start at the other 2. No lies on YouTube community, Nigel Mansell and his 92 season scored 9 wins and 14 poles out of 16 races, which had almost double the points of the nearest rival, which was his teammate. True. In terms of like single seasons, Nigel Mansell's 92 takes some beating. There weren't many suggestions for Nigel, but you got to remember that season you had Senna, Schumacher, Hill, Hakkinen, Patrese, Berger. Yet Nigel won the first 5 on the bounce, then got a P2, then a retirement, then won the next 3 on the bounce. The championship was pretty much settled already with like 6 races to go, and 3 of those final 6 races he retired. Yet he still scored almost double the points of his teammate Riccardo Patrese, 108 to 56. You look at 91 though as well. He didn't win the title, but he took 5 race wins, finishing P2 behind Ayrton Senna. And that was arguably, again, prime Senna. I would say 91 to 92 Mansell's probably the most overlooked prime that I've found on this list going through people's responses. Because 91-92 Mansell was really good. And just think how much more aerodynamic grip he would have had if he didn't have that moustache. Imagine. Now let's go even further back to an era where the TVs were black and white, the racing was deadly, yet the cream still rised to the top. Starting with 2 times World Championship winner, Jim Clark. At Alex Hunt 90, Jim Clark between 63 and 65 scored 100% points possible in both seasons and holds the Grand Slam record, last of which was in 1965, won the 63 Belgian Grand Prix by 5 minutes in torrential rain, as well as winning the BTCC and Indy 500 in that time. A Relamo, Jim Clark's run from 62 to 65 was pretty incredible. From Monaco 62 to Mexico 65, he took 19 wins and 25 poles in 38 races in a competitive era with lots of world champions on the grid. In many races, he was simply untouchable. At Harry McSherry, Jim Clark easily made the good drivers look average. If it wasn't for reliability and his tragic death, he would have had 50 plus wins and beaten Fangio's championship record at the time. Mr. Shrewey Gaming, Clark in 65, the guy won the F1 title, the Indy 500, several other categories of racing in the same year. The things he accomplished that season haven't been done ever since. He truly was a pure talent, unlike any other driver before or after him. And finally, Liam Talks Motorsport, great knowledge from Liam. Jim Clark, car and machine worked in perfect harmony in both 63 and 65, became the only driver to win Indy and F1 in the same year, but also had terrible luck in other seasons, 66 and 67. He should have had 5 titles, in my opinion, since 64 was unlucky, 4 DNFs plus 2 oil line problems, plus his death meant we never got to see a proper prime Clark in 1968. Again, you lot have kind of done all the work for me. I mean, in 63, he scored 73 points in total. Yes, they only took your top 6 results, but 73 in total. Richie Ginter in P2 scored 34 points in total, so he's over double the amount of P2. And that 1965 season, just absolute joke. Wins the first race in South Africa, misses the Monaco Grand Prix to compete in the Indy 500, wins it, then comes back, wins the next 5 races on the bounce. The last 3, DNFs a couple, finishes P10. Doesn't matter. He wins 6 out of 10. They only count your best 6 races. It's a 100% point scoring season. He still has 2 big records to his name as well. He's got 8 Grand Slams, which is when you get pole position, fastest lap, win the race and lead every lap. He's got 8 of them. Lewis in second has only got 6 only. And he has the highest percentage of laps led in a season with 71.14%. For reference, Max Verstappen has led a lot of laps this year, right? In 2021, but after the Qatar Grand Prix, he's only sitting at 52.1%. Jim, of course, lost his life in 1968 in an F2 crash at the Hockenheim Ring. Look, 32 years of age, still had a lot of career ahead of him. Like Senna, it's what could have been. And then even a little bit further back, to El Maestro is what the Argentinians used to call him. Manuel Fangio was the first man to ever dominate Formula 1. And he did it in like his 40s as well. All these young whippersnappers were getting slapped up. Arav S on YouTube community, greatest prime, the 5 of Fangio. Well, despite being a diehard Vettel fan, those grew dads at Red Bull, I'd say the most dominant driver in his prime has got to be good old El Maestro himself, Juan Manuel Fangio. He was a pure narcissist, if you ask me, and rightly so considering he was one of the oldest drivers on the grid and yet managed to dish out such stellar results. Very well put, Arav. At DV Cotton, Fangio, if that's your criteria, he was 37 during his first F1 race and went on to capture 5 championships. By 37, you're way past your prime as a racing driver. In most of his races, he was the oldest driver, so imagine what he would have been like in his 20s. At Real Merit, if Fangio's prime existed, it would topple our current driver's prime. Dude was literally an old man racing people young enough to be his son, yet he was a 5-time champion. Look, you go through his wiki and it's just first place, a few seconds, but mainly first places. He didn't win the very first Formula 1 World Drivers' title in 1950, but he did win every single race he finished. He won 3, but then retired in the other 3, so Farina took the championship. Of course, it's very difficult with Fangio because it was the start of F1. Reliability was, of course, a significant component, but then that's up until, the 90s as well, to be fair. But when Fangio finished a race, he usually won it. Can you question the relative quality of the field? Of course you can, because it was the fundamental kind of start of the sport, right? It was just a lot of rich blokes, but there was still talent out there. And like I said, Fangio always won. Can only beat whoever's in front of you at the end of the day. So what a trailblazer Manuel Fangio was, the first driver to properly dominate this sport. And for the last of the old timers, and again, he didn't get very many recommendations, suggestions, but I have to dedicate a section to Sir Jackie Stewart, surely. At Urbanist Adam, gotta be Jackie Stewart, the way he dominated all 3 of his title seasons, winning non-stop while teammates were struggling to finish on the podium, getting the title for Matra with almost twice as many points as anyone else, finding a way to win in whatever car he drove. I mean, Jackie's record is incredible. So in 69, he won 6 out of the 11 races he competed in, retired in 8 out of 13 races in 1970, still managed a win, 2 P2s and a P3. So who knows what would have happened if he hadn't retired so much. And then in 71, he won 6 out of 11 races again, like he did in 69. And then in 72, he still won 4 races, although the title went to Emerson Fittipaldi. Particularly 69 to 71, Stewart was absolute top tier. And I love the Flying Scotsman. He's still knocking about now. He's like the only title winner from the 60s who's still alive. He's still at pretty much every other F1 race with his old tartan cap on. Long may it continue. One of the greatest, no question, and an absolute pioneer for safety in Formula 1 as well. Now back to the current days, a driver who we can't talk about primes in Formula 1 and not talk about Lewis Hamilton, can we? As tweeted by RP, Lewis Hamilton, 1, been at the top of the grid ever since joining F1 in 2007. 2, won at least 1 race in every single season of F1 he's competed in, even in 2009 and 13, where he had cars that were mediocre at best and bad at worst. 3, statistically the greatest of all time. Beethoven's Leger, without question or hesitation, Lewis Hamilton, the only driver to win a race every year he's been in F1, aka the greatest of all time. At J. Rue, considering his reign, it's difficult not to consider Hamilton's prime as chief among them. He'll soon be 37 and he's the reigning champ and in a fight to secure his 8th. There aren't enough characters allowed to list the stats to support it. At Kev the Brit, 86, Lewis without a doubt nearly got the title in his first year, win every season, and now 36 and still going strong. That's a definition of a great prime. You don't know when it starts or ends. Mr. Thompson, Alex, Lewis 18 to 20, 32 wins, 23 poles in 58 starts, won 15 times, 47% when not on pole, and finished off the podium on just 9 occasions. Relentless in 2018, single-handedly taking the fight to a faster Ferrari, faultless in 19 with a slower Saturday car, and just brilliant in 20. Look, 7 world titles, possibly 8. We'll have to wait and see 2008, 14, 15, 17... 18, 19, 20. What is the prime? Is it still going now? 19 and 20 were probably the 2 consecutive years he was kind of untouchable, I'd say. The Mercedes W10 is probably the greatest Formula 1 car ever to be built, but only at the hands of Lewis. Sorry, Valtteri. Because again, the caveat with all of these is that, all of these were great drivers, but also had the best cars, or at least one of the best cars in the period. Stick Lewis in this year's Haas and he's not getting out of Q1. I'm sorry, no one is. Ferrari did stump up much more of a challenge in 17 and 18, but then the fact that Lewis fended them off, is that just even more of a sign of his prime being incredible? Lewis's domination has bored a lot of people, okay? But ultimately, people will look back on these years of Lewis domination and I think give them more respect than they're getting in the moment, because I understand people don't like the same person winning all the time, right? Lewis Hamilton is unquestionably one of the best to ever do it, statistically the best to ever do it, and his prime still is amazing. And that's it. There's no other drivers that kind of spring to mind in terms of the... Oh, wait. That's for you Seb fans out there who think that I hate Sebastian Vettel. When I actually really don't. That's the most frustrating thing with this job. People think you think a certain thing when you actually don't, because you've been critical of them a few times. You cannot talk about primes and domination in Formula One without talking about Du bist Weltmeister Sebastian Vettel. By far and away the most suggested person in response to this question. I'll get through a few. At Aryan Prakash, Sebastian Vettel utter domination, won 13 races and his teammate won none, single-handedly outscored all other teams different gravy in 2013, pretty much since the Asia leg of 2012. Boothhead 4399, McLaren Kimi was magical to watch but definitely has to be Toro Rosso Red Bull. Seb, thrown in at the deep end at BMW and scored points, managed to win in a Toro Rosso and then was pretty much unstoppable for 4 years. At Dom B116, Sebastian Vettel 2011 was absolutely dominant. 2012 he had a clutch run of 4 in Asia to claw back a 40-point deficit, then coming from the back of the field twice in 3 to win back his championship. 2013 he equalled the season win record and a 9 streak of wins never matched by Lewis Hamilton. At F1 Visionary, Profit got a shout out here, mate. One driver only had dominant cars for 1.5 years and walked away with most ever poles in a season, joint most wins in a season, most wins in a row, all while collecting 4 titles while being younger than Carlos Sainz. 2 in last race battles. You need not look past my GOAT. Only had a dominant car for 1.5 years out of those 4. That's sure to cause some discussion in the comments. Felicia on F1. If Tommo has to make a video praising Seb's prime, I think I will have seen it. Oh, had to put this one in. I don't hate him, okay? I don't hate him. At Gunner 1896, Red Bull Sebastian Vettel, 13 wins in a season, 9 of those in consecutive races is unbelievable. Never seen a driver so perfectly in harmony with his car. Sure, he had the fastest car of that era, but the fact that Webber was never vice world champion shows that there was competition. And Zinka_99X, Prime Vettel post-summer break 2013, man and machine in perfect harmony, 9 consecutive race wins, plus that Singapore performance and speed difference over everyone else. I'm convinced that effort will never be repeated again or beaten in the future. He was simply unbreakable. Yes, okay, it was a close run thing in 2010 and 2012, but again, Schumacher's was close in a couple of seasons, Hamilton's been close in a couple of seasons. Rarely does any full world championship in a row period. Yes, of course, drivers got close, but Seb always managed to find a way to win. And 9 wins on a bounce, I don't think that'll ever be beaten, personally. To dominate the sport in the early 2010s, with the amount of talent on the field, he was just driving on another level. The confidence, the maturity, the speed he could pull out of that Red Bull was just... Webber wasn't near for the majority of that time. And you look at the way he came into the sport again, BMW, Toro Rosso, 1 at Monza. Just up until the end of 2013, Seb's career had been pretty much perfect. I've been critical with his career since, as of many others, but there's no doubt in my mind, in terms of primes, greatest primes of all time, Seb has to be up there. But there we go. Before we wrap, a few honourable mentions. Mario Andretti, Emerson Fittipaldi, Gilles Villeneuve, Niki Lauda as well. All fantastic drivers, but didn't really get more than 1 suggestion. So this video has been long enough anyway. For me, in no particular order, I'm going to say Clark, Schumacher, Vettel. In what order? I don't know. I'm sorry. That's as much as you're getting out of me, all right? Don't have a go at me in the comments. Have a go at everyone else. But yeah, let me know what you think in the comments down below. Did you enjoy this one? Who's your greatest prime of all time? And what would you like to see me do for the next episode of this maybe new series, maybe not? Maybe something a bit more niche next time, I don't know, favourite race engineer one-liner, okay? No, to be fair, that's just Du bist Weltmeister, isn't it? So, but yes, thank you very much for watching. Thank you again to Squarespace for sponsoring this video and what I do. I hope you enjoyed this one. It's been very long, but we don't have a race this weekend, so you're welcome. My name continues to be Tommo. Thanks again. Have a good one. Ta-da.